Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are here to talk about some brand new underrated palettes that you may not have heard a whole lot of fuss about, but I still think they're pretty good. So we're going to take a look at those today, and if that's something you're interested in watching, you're in the right place. We're about to get into it.
I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf.
So here we are at the end, well, at least coming into the end, at least the final quarter of 2019, and whew, it's been a lot this year, you guys, like a lot. It really has just been a year of getting inundated from all sides on products, palettes, new lines, new collabs. I think every single brand came out with new complexion this year. It has been a race to see who can crank out the most product. And I think oftentimes because of that and because of the environment that we live in now in the beauty industry of new releases coming out every single day, sometimes some good quality products kind of get swept underneath the wayside or don't get as much attention as they maybe normally would because there's so many other products coming out around the same time. Sometimes people just get what they call consumer fatigue, where you're just tired of it. You're just tired of seeing the next palette. You're just tired of seeing the next powder, and customers can get fatigued pretty quickly. And I think in 2019, the beauty industry has probably done more damage to their consumer base than they have good, because at this point, people are just like, oh my gosh, I can't take any more. I have enough. In the beauty industry, you're seeing a lot of trends popping up like anti-hauls, anti-consumerism, 5 ways to detect things that you don't need to buy. There are a lot of videos that are coming out, especially here on YouTube, about anti-consumerism, particularly in the beauty industry. And brands don't have anybody to blame but themselves. I don't think it's about how much you can crank out. It's got to start being about quality. But at the end of the day, as long as there are people out there willing to snatch all this stuff up, they're going to keep cranking it out. So that's what this channel's for, trying to weed through all of the garbage and pull out the gems that I find that I feel like would be a good match for you, my audience. Hopefully we can do that with some of these newer palettes today. So first, let's talk about KKW Beauty. A lot of times, the KKW Beauty line is not talked about as much as it used to be back in the olden days of coming out with those contour sticks that were all the rage. But honestly, again, KKW Beauty is one of those brands I think that is guilty of cranking out so much product. I mean, for the love of God, she even has her own line of Spanx now. She also came out with the body foundation, which I thought was interesting. I would be interested to see what a complexion product for the face would look like from KKW Beauty, because I really like their concealer formula. So I would be curious to see what a foundation looks like from KKW Beauty, but we haven't quite gotten that just yet. We have gotten, however, some palettes this year, in addition to lipsticks and Spanx and perfumes and a ton of other crap that was launched. There was actually a palette that got launched that I really, really like. Now, this palette came 2 collections ago out of the matte collection. I think her newest collection is the KKW Winnie collection. This one came out of the collection before that. Now, obviously, it's an all matte palette, so I immediately had my ears perked up because I love me a good old-fashioned all matte palette. She had 2 versions of this all matte palette. She had one that was very kind of cool tone with a lot of grays in it. And then she had one that was a little more warm tone with a lot of browns and rust colors in it. And of course, that's the one that I gravitated towards, and that is the Matte Cocoa palette. I'll give you guys a close-up of it here. So the Matte Cocoa palette is a 10-pan eyeshadow palette that's formulated for an easy blendable application featuring all matte shadows that provide a creamy, powdery finish in an array of warm brown and tan tones that give you seamless blending. The one thing that I absolutely adore about this palette is, number one, the KKW formula has always been astounding, and I honestly think it's because Mario has always had his fingers in this line, so I don't think that he would ever let Kim put out a eyeshadow formula that wasn't outstanding. So her eyeshadow formulas are always spot on. I really do like a lot of her shimmer formulas. They are some of the most beautiful shimmer formulas out there. However, her matte formula is pretty spectacular. This palette in particular is great for gradient work. So if you like to kind of darken your crease and then blow it up to a lighter gradient, that is what I like to do. I like to do that a lot with my looks. This is a great palette for that because the palette itself is kind of like a gradient. You have your lighter options, and then you have your transition type colors, then you have your creating depth in your crease color, and then of course you have a really deep color here if you want to just really get into some smoky looks. But these mattes are gorgeous. They look absolutely stunning. You have a lot of mochas and mahoganies. This hickory brown, that's this really deep color, is beautiful, and it pairs really, really good with these kind of buttercream cantaloupe type of orange colors on this side. Overall, this is a beautiful palette. If you have like really crepey lids and shimmer is just something that you tend to try and avoid. I know a lot of ladies that are very insecure about crepey lids and having shimmer on the lids because sometimes it tends to exacerbate that a little bit. I personally have really crepey lids, and I love shimmer so much that I don't care. I put it on there anyway. But I know a lot of women really like that muted down matte look because it makes the lid just look so smooth and so beautiful when you have an all matte look on the eye. I totally get it. And if that's your cup of tea, I would absolutely recommend checking this palette out. It's a gorgeous palette. It has nice everyday colors in here, but there's enough darkness out of these that you can really amp up to some pretty sultry evening looks. And it's one of the better all matte palettes that I've seen in quite a long time. So definitely one that wasn't talked about a lot, but absolutely one that I love. Next up, let's talk about ColourPop. Man, you want to talk about a company that cranks out way too much product. ColourPop is one of the first companies that I think of. Oh my gosh, they put out so much stuff. Well, one palette this year actually did catch my eye, and that is the Whatever palette. And I love this one simply because the one thing that I really like that ColourPop has started to do is they've really started to include a wide variety of finishes inside of their palettes. For example, in this one you have a Super Shock shadow. You also have a pressed glitter here, in addition to some duochromes and mattes. Now, ColourPop didn't used to have this amount of variety when it came to formula finishes inside of their palettes, and I really like that they've been incorporating a lot of different textures inside of these little palettes. This one in particular I fell in love with just because of the color story, and I'll give you guys a close-up of it here. So this is the palette of kind of like that fall season. You have rich burgundies, warm terracottas. Again, you have a wide variety of mixed finishes in here. Shadows, glitters, pressed pigments, Super Shock shadows, etc. I really like the variety in particular with this palette. Some of these pigments are actual pressed pigments, and then of course you have the Super Shock shadow here, you have the pressed glitter here, and then you have some really beautiful metallics that are just stunning. I think those are just such classic fall type of metallics. They just look beautiful. It makes for a really pretty palette. ColourPop's formula is pretty solid. I also like to use a pigment primer with the ColourPop formula. Also with their glitters and with their Super Shocks, if you have a glitter glue, it'll make those last a little bit longer as well. So you may have to put a little bit of elbow grease into it, but it's an $18 palette, so it's very inexpensive. It looks really good. I love this variety. I love the color scheme. I like this palette, and I feel like it just got ran over by the 8 releases that came behind it. It just aggravates me nowadays. It was a really cute launch. It actually came with a burgundy type of mascara that you can wear, which actually does just give your eye this really pretty pop. If you put black like on your upper lashes and then put the burgundy on your lower lashes, it's just such a cute look. Even if you put your first coat on as black and then your second coat on as burgundy, your lashes just kind of have this beautiful tint to them when you turn your head outside in the sunlight. That's gorgeous. It also came with a Joyride, which is this burgundy liner, so you can also get this burgundy gel liner, and of course they also have Joyride in regular gel liners that they have that are the retractable ones that you can use on the eye like this. So I love how they color coordinate their palettes with some really cute kind of accessories. I loved that about that little collection, but again, it just kind of got, you know, ran over by the 6 collections that launched right after that. So I feel like it just kind of got forgotten about, and I really like this little palette, so definitely wanted to talk about her. Another palette that came out that was incredibly underrated is a brand new Makeup Revolution Foil Frenzy palette. Now, for those of you that don't remember the first Foil Frenzy palette that we discussed here on this channel, we talked about how unique the Foil Frenzy formula is. It's basically a poured pigment. So it's this liquid formulation that actually gets poured into the pans and then it sets, and it is the most incredible, to this day, foiled eyeshadow formula that I have ever worked with, as far as how intense it is, number one, and how long lasting it is on the eye. I still don't know why this isn't more popular, but this was the original Foil Frenzy palette. As you can see, it has had a lot of love over the course of this last year, but these are still some of the best foils in the game. I love these for accent colors. They're absolutely gorgeous. Well, Ulta actually got an exclusive from Makeup Revolution, because I believe that this palette is an exclusive launch specifically to Ulta from Makeup Revolution. And this one is called the Foil Frenzy Hybrid. Now, this is a hybrid because it has that original poured pigment, but they've also incorporated some shadow colors into the poured pigment. So you have quite a wide variety of shades in here, which make this formula even better. So this starts out as a cream, and once it's applied, it sets down to a powder that actually blends out quite well. These are beautiful complete lid shadows. I love this palette, you guys. These colors are so rich and so intense. It is genuinely astounding that more people don't talk about this. This is one of my favorite shades out of the palette. It's just this gorgeous taupey color. It's this one right here. I absolutely love it. It looks beautiful anytime that you're wearing denim. Just to put this across your lid and just throw on some mascara and blend it up into the crease just a little bit, and it looks absolutely amazing. But this has some really bold colors in it compared to the last Foil Frenzy palette that came out that was, you know, very, very bold, but these also have some duochromes in them. Like this one right here has like a purple topper, but underneath it you can see a little bit of burgundy. You have some bright blues. I'll show you guys the swatches so you can see what all of this looks like up close, because it really is gorgeous. So again, each pan offers this really creamy texture that transforms into a powder for an incredible high shine finish. You've got blue, green, copper. You have a really pretty cool gold in here. You have 15 shades that really pack a punch. You can use these individually. You can also mix the tones for a really pretty standout shimmer look. Now, one thing you can do with this formula as well is to apply it wet, and that even amps up the drama even more with these. There's a champagne in here that if you damp it a little bit and use it on the inner corner, it absolutely makes your inner corner pop and looks absolutely stunning. It's this one right here. It is like the best inner corner foil that you will ever find. These palettes are gorgeous, both of them. I would absolutely recommend both of them. That this one is stunning for $12. I'll absolutely drop the coin to add this to my collection. It's really, really gorgeous. They stumbled on a really good formula with these two particular palettes. So if you haven't had a chance to check out any of the Foil Frenzy palettes from Makeup Revolution, they're 100% worth it. They're gorgeous. And if you have crepier lids like I do, it's one of the few shimmer shades out there that doesn't accentuate texture as much. Because they set down to such a beautiful powder, it really does just kind of smooth out the lid. So if I'm going to reach for a really bright type of shocking, more dramatic shimmer on the eye, usually I will reach for a shimmer out of here. I absolutely love them. They photograph beautifully. Amazing formula, great palette. Next up is a brand new one that just launched without a lot of fanfare, but I actually really like it. I was kind of a fan of the version they had last year, but this year's is stunning. And that is this year's Too Faced Gingerbread palette. Now, last year's gingerbread was nice. I liked a lot of the color story out of it, but this one is the extra spicy. I'll give you guys a close-up of it here. So this one is basically like taking the original gingerbread palette and just turning up the heat a little bit. You have some really warm, sexy, kind of smoldering shades in this palette. Very rich, spicy daytime looks. You can get really that kind of hot, smoldering nighttime look out of here as well. You can get everything in between. You get 18 shades out of here, and of course, it smells like gingerbread, but that's not the best part about this palette. Honestly, for me, the best part about this palette is this year's color story. It is so stunning, you guys. The formula is really good. A lot of the Too Faced palettes can be very hit or miss when it comes to their formulas. I've noticed, especially the Christmas ones that they crank out in the kits that look like Christmas trees, and they have like 3 different palettes in them. Some of the other palettes that are in like cardboard flip out type of pans. Those palettes, I don't know what it is about that formula, but those palettes tend to not be very good. The eyeshadow formula is very patchy. It's really hard to work with. I don't know if it's a different formula, if they work with a different lab when they crank those kinds of things out, but this formula is amazing, and the color story in this is stunning. So if you've been thinking of pulling the trigger on this one, I actually have the original, so I don't mind having the second one because they really are 2 different palettes. The first one is kind of like a little sister to this one. This one is just has a lot richer colors in it. You have a lot more golds, a lot more of these really pretty bronzes in here. This midnight snack color right here is this black that has this like blue shimmer in it. It really is like a midnight color. It's like a blacky blue, and it is stunning on the eye. Of course, the shimmer shades in here are gorgeous, and there are quite a few mattes out of the 18 shades in here as well. So of course that made me happy. I think it's just a really well balanced palette, and the formula in it is Really, really nice. So another one I haven't heard a lot of folks talking about, but I think it's absolutely beautiful. Next up is one that we talked about over on Instagram. So if you've seen my Instagram TV story, you already know the palette that I'm about to talk about. And this palette is made out of a very iconic formula. Now, Wet n Wild has these small palettes called Color Icon palettes. I actually really like them. The Color Icon eyeshadow formula is a good formula for the drugstore. It's one of the better drugstore eyeshadow formulas out there. They actually have a 32 pan Color Icon palette that Wet n Wild makes, and it only retails for $15, you guys. So I jumped at the chance to snag it up. They have it online at their website, and this is what the palette looks like. It just is a cardboard palette, nothing special about it really, which I like because they kept the components simple so they could keep the retail at $15, which I think is amazing considering what you get in here. So they are exactly like the Color Icon pans usually are in those little palettes, except you have 32 of them. And you guys, some of these shades are really gorgeous. I'll show you guys some footage of my IGTV video here so you can see what some of the swatches look like. But some of these shades are just so beautiful. I love these turquoise shades, these peach shades that are in here. A lot of them are just stunning. There is an entire row of mattes in here that is absolutely gorgeous. I would love to have this entire row as its own standout individual palette. I think this row is gorgeous, and it's full of nothing but mattes. There's only 3 shimmers in this row. There is 2 shimmer, actually no, there's 1, 2, 3, there's 4 shimmers in this row, and then this row has 1, 2, 3, 4 shimmers as well. So this one up here is nothing but mattes, and this row I've dipped into quite a bit just to get some really pretty everyday looks. But some of these shimmer shades are outstanding. It's the Color Icon formula. It's iconic. Everybody knows for a drugstore brand, this is a really good formula. So if you don't have a lot of money and you're looking for a way to get a really good palette that has a lot of variety in here for very little coin, $15, and you can get a really good deal out of this one. And of course, how can we talk about Wet n Wild without talking about the palette that broke the internet? And that is the Wet n Wild 40 palette. Now, this is the palette that they created to celebrate their 40th anniversary. As a result of that, they also created a palette that had 40 pans in it. And because this is a large palette that has 40 pans, it's going to have a lot of different colors in it. And according to the internet, this is basically the James Charles palette part 2. But this is the 40 pan palette from Wet n Wild. Now, I was really hesitant when it came to this palette because, number one, I wasn't sure about the formula. I thought for $20, how good can it be? It actually retails for like $19.99. But you guys, this is a really good eyeshadow formula. I would tell you if it wasn't. It's really good, you guys. As a matter of fact, let me show you, first of all, let me show you this palette up close, just so you can see what I'm talking about as far as the shades are concerned. I'll show you that here. So again, this is their 40th anniversary palette. It includes some iconic shadow colors they have in their vault. It also has some brand new ones in here as well. Super pigmented shadows. They have matte, pearl, metallic finishes. Again, you have really soft mattes, you have beautiful shimmers, and you also have some really high shine metallics in here. So you have 3 different finishes overall in this palette. If we were to look at a side-by-side of the palette that everyone is screaming this one looks like, here is the James Charles palette, and here is the Wet n Wild palette. Now, obviously there are some similarities, and some of the similarities are quite striking, to be honest with you. So at the end of the day, did they dupe the palette? They probably did, but there are quite a few differences in this palette as well. For example, if you look at this shade up here, this shade, in the very, very corner of the James Charles palette, that's not the shade that's over here in this one. And as you go like row by row, you find a lot of those one-offs. In addition to that, they chose to use some gigantic pans in this one, whereas this one just kept it cute with pans that are all the same size. So it's not that there's an extra row, but there's extra shadows in here. They were able to fit more shadows in that middle row than James Charles was able to fit, because his pans obviously are a lot bigger. But one thing that I do want to do is just show you guys really closely. I want to take some of these shades from the James Charles palette, and I want to swipe them next to their corresponding shade in the Wet n Wild palette, just so that you guys can see a couple of the shades and how they differ, because they do differ. And I also want you to look at some of the shimmers and how different that formula is here. So let's take a look at that here. Alright guys, so neither one of these palettes have shade names, so we're just going to go with the colors. And on the left you see Wet n Wild, on the right you'll see the James Charles palette. And like here, this is a perfect example of 2 shades from the Wet n Wild, 2 from the James Charles, and they look pretty good as far as comparison goes. Now, on these 2 particular shades, I actually prefer the 2 on the left, which are from the Wet n Wild palette, as opposed to the 2 on the right from the James Charles palette. Now, when we look at the next swatches, that's actually flipped. With these 2, I actually prefer the 2 on the right from the James Charles palette as opposed to the 2 on the left. So it is just kind of a mixed bag, honestly. Some in the Wet n Wild palette are better, some in the James Charles palette are better. As far as these shimmer shades in particular, in the Wet n Wild palette, I love this shimmer formula. They have these beautiful micro glitters in these shimmers. When they catch the light and you have this formula on your eyes, it just looks stunning, you guys. This is a beautiful shimmer formula, and I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite things about this palette. The mattes are really great too. So the Wet n Wild formula, the shimmer shades in particular, they have a lot of micro glitter in them. So they are a lot more sparkly, they're a lot more glittery, whereas in the James Charles palette, you're just talking about like a true shimmer or a true, metallic on the lid. Whereas these are a lot more sparkly because they do have a lot more micro glitter in them. In addition to that, I also think that they did a great job at kind of following this same color story. So I think they did a good job at that, but they also did a really good job of coming up with some unique shades that are specific to this palette and this palette alone. A couple of my favorite of those right off the top of my head is this one right here, this pink. It's kind of this beautiful dusty rose color. It's a matte, and this color is not duplicated in the James Charles palette. In addition to that, these 2 teal colors right here, beautiful, very pigmented. There are a lot of mattes in this palette, which I don't mind personally. So, you know what? I think they do have their similarities, you guys, but they also have their differences. And each palette has their own strengths. I think the James Charles palette is a solid formula. We know that these colors are gorgeous. We know how they perform. A lot of them are, beautiful pressed pigments. I don't know if he got it from China or if he worked 10 years on the design of this palette. I am not even going to weigh in on that argument, but I can talk about looking at these 2 palettes side by side, and I think they both stand out on their own and have their own really great qualities, and they both can stand on their own merit. What I will say about this particular palette is the formula is great. You get a huge range of shadows in here, and you guys, for the price point, I mean, for $19.99, you pretty much got everything you need in this one palette. And the formula itself, absolutely Erica approved. The shimmers are gorgeous. The mattes are gorgeous. I love this palette. And I didn't expect to. I really thought we were just going to be dealing with like a cheap kind of knockoff version of the James Charles palette, and the formula wasn't going to be as good. I don't know. I just had something in my head that was just really anti this palette. I really thought it was going to be kind of cheap and a little hokey, but I really like it. I even like the packaging. It's this really soft matte packaging. It's just a nice palette. I think this is a beautiful 40th anniversary palette. It's a shame that it kind of got outshined by all of the drama that blew up around it. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it brought a lot of attention to the palette. If that's what they were trying to do, then they definitely succeeded there. But it is a really good palette, you guys, and absolutely worth the spend. And last but not least, you guys, listen. I have been very anti Anastasia Beverly Hills lately because I really thought they had gotten to a point where they were just duplicating palettes. When the Jackie Aina palette came out, I honestly looked at all of my ABH palettes and I was like I have all these colors. I either have it in the soft glam or I have it in, you know what I'm saying? Like if you are like me and you have the Riviera and you have the soft glam and you have subculture and you have all of these ABH palettes, when they come out with a new one, you're kind of like, I think I have those colors already. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. When the Jackie Aina palette came out, I was like, yeah, it just wasn't for me, guys. I just felt like I have a lot of their palettes, and I just feel like when they're releasing those palettes that, you know, we kind of already have them if you have any of the other palettes. Well, then Norvina went on this crazy kick and started really cranking out these big, huge, crazy palettes that are like Norvina palettes. And I will say that when I first saw them, I was excited. I was like, oh, wow, that is a huge palette. I would love to get a hold of one of those. But then the first one came out and I was like, what am I going to do with those crazy colors? And then the second one came out and I was like, and what am I going to do with those crazy colors? And then the third one came out and I went, So it's so funny. After the second one came out, I was like, okay, obviously the Norvina palettes are just not for me. She's going to go down this very bright, colorful road. And honestly, in 2019, when I'm looking at a palette to purchase like for myself and not to just review here on the channel, I really do try and look for things that either A, aren't in my collection, or B, are something that I'm going to use by wearing that every day. And honestly, looking at the version 1 and version 2 of the Norvina palette, that's just not something that I would wear every day and get a lot of use out of. And when you're going to jack the price up on those palettes all the way up to $60, then it better be something that I'm going to use fairly frequently. So I had honestly just resigned myself to pass on the Norvina collection until that third palette came out, and that one got me because you guys know my color story and what I really like. And the one thing too is I did get a chance to try this formula to see if it was any different, and these are a very different formula. So the formulas that come in the smaller palettes, so the Sultry palette, the Riviera palette, the Alyssa Edwards palette, and the newer palettes that they've come out with in the smaller size, those palettes and those formulas are like, your first ingredients are typically like mica, and there's silicones in there. There's even glycerin in like the first 5 ingredients. They're very soft pigments and they tend to fluff around a little bit. They're not very beginner friendly, but they do require a little bit of finesse on the eyes. But if you can work with that formula, they're stunning. I actually have quite a few of those palettes because they're beautiful. These larger palettes, on the other hand, are made with what they're calling their Pro Pigment formula. It's a harder formula. It's a talc-based formula. Talc is going to be pretty much the first ingredient on just about all of these shades. They're harder pressed into the pan. There's less fallout. They're not as soft and kind of delicate. They're a lot easier to work with. They're a lot more user friendly. They're a lot more beginner friendly in my opinion. So even though they're calling this like the professional pigment formula, I honestly think the regular palettes, these types of palettes, are probably more for advanced, and these are actually a little bit more beginner friendly. So the third palette is the palette that actually caught my eye because of the color scheme in here. I thought I would get much more everyday use out of it. Number one. Number two, when I actually got it, I was a little shocked at how big it was. I honestly, just by everything that I've seen online, and I haven't seen that many like reviews on it, I've just looked at a lot of pictures of it online, it looked a little bit smaller to me. So I was very surprised to see at how large it is. And I was actually surprised to see that there's 25 shades in here at this size. These are quite large pans, and you're getting a lot of product in here. At the pans being this large and this size, I actually sat a little bit better with that $60 investment. You're also talking about a component that's stunning as well. It has a mirror, a huge mirror here, which is nice because you can just sit it on your desk or on your vanity, and you have your full face in this mirror. And then of course you have all of these shades, and I like this formula. I wasn't sure if I was going to. I thought maybe she was sacrificing quality just so that she had a more user-friendly type of formula here, but she really didn't. She did a great job on the formula itself. It's incredibly pigmented. And when I say these colors pack a punch, they really pack a punch. So you don't need very much at all. Just very, very light taps of your brush. You honestly can just tap it a couple of times. That right there is enough to blend for 10 minutes on the eye. It really requires very little product to do an eye look. These greens are stunning. Some of the coral colors in here are beautiful, but I think some of the really pretty standout shades in here are a lot of the understated shades. These browns here and a lot of these neutrals are just gorgeous. These understated shimmer shadows are stunning. This is actually a duochrome that has a beautiful flip to it, but I'll show you guys this palette in some swatches up close here. So this is what they're calling a quote-unquote professional grade artistry palette, and it features 25 deluxe sized, very high performance shades in here. This is a very autumn themed color story in this particular palette. This is the number 3 palette. These are limited edition pro palettes, so I don't know how long they're going to be around. Norvina curated them herself, and there are a ton of mattes in here. You do have some metallics in here as well, but you are going to get a couple of sparkles tossed in here and there. There is one shade in here that is a matte that has a little bit of sparkle kind of sprinkled in there, but several of these are pressed pigments, but there are some of them that are not. So some of the ones in here are just shadows. Now, the shadows, because she has so many of them between all 3 palettes, they actually don't have names. They have numbers. So like this is A4, this is A3, this is A2, and you can go and you can actually look at the shades included portion of the website where it's talking about this palette, and there's actually an asterisk next to the shades that are pressed pigments. So there are some shadows in here that aren't pressed pigments, that are just a typical shadow. So For example, A4, this one right here, this isn't a pressed pigment. This is just a shadow that has a little bit of a silver sparkle kind of sprinkled in there. You also have D3, which is right here. This green, this is just a matte green. This is just a really nice shadow formula that's really, really pigmented, but it's not a pressed pigment. It's just a shadow. So you'll have some of them that are pressed pigments, some of them that are just regular shadows, and then of course you have your metallics and duochrome formulas in here as well. So quite a wide variety. Really, really beautiful packaging. I do love this a lot more than I thought I would, and the $60 is sitting a little bit more comfortable with me considering the amount of shadows that are inside of this palette. Now, because ABH has literally flooded us with product this year, everything from the new foundation to the Alyssa Edwards palette, the Jackie Aina palette, Norvina dumped 3 of these gigantic palettes on top of us. I get worried that little gems like this kind of fall through the cracks because people are just over it. They just don't want to see so much product. This could have been stretched out over 3 years. Done first volume 1, then volume 2, then volume 3, but to slam it all down in the span of a month, like there wasn't even, I think there was like a week in between each one of these coming out. It's crazy, you guys. It's crazy. And honestly, the way that 2019 is going, it really worries me for 2020. And I'll tell you why. The reason these guys are cranking out so much product this year is because their net profits at the end of 2018 were astronomical. 2018 was the year that the beauty industry exploded from a consumer perspective. It had kind of been building up and building up as the beauty industry became more popular over the course of the last decade, and just kind of hit this crescendo in 2018 where it seemed like everyone was hyper focused on the beauty industry. A lot of that had to do with YouTuber influencers exploding onto the scene, and of course the YouTuber first Armageddon that hit us last year, with all of this drama that happened between high profile YouTubers that actually started leaking out into the mainstream press, which got a lot of normies attention, and regular average everyday people that don't actually watch beauty videos started paying attention. And as a result of that, they kind of got sucked in and sucked into the consumerism of it all. But the beauty industry really expanded their profits last year. So what do beauty companies typically do when they make a lot of money, especially when they make a lot of money in a relatively short period of time? Typically, they'll turn around and they'll reinvest it in the company. And I think that's what happened at the end of 2018 when everyone's books looked amazing. I kind of knew in the back of my head, as 2018 was really, really turning out to be an amazing year, in the back of my head, I was like, man, these guys are already working on next year's releases. With all of this money, everybody's working on next year releases. And sure enough, 2019 rolled around and we got hit with every product all of these guys have had in the works, probably for like the whole last year. So it really worries me about next year. I'm like, can it possibly get any worse? I don't know, you guys. But listen, as we roll into the holiday season, just be really smart with your buying choices. Make good choices. Really stop and ask yourself a couple of questions, especially when it comes to palettes in particular. Number 1, is it the packaging that's calling you? Do you really, really need it? Do you already have those colors? Number 2, always cover up that pop of color. So if you have a palette that has, like, for example, all neutral palette, but then it has that pop of teal or that pop of pink, cover up that pop of pink and look at the rest of the palette, because I bet you already have those colors. So if you see that kind of pop of color palette that's really calling your name, cover up the 1 or 2 shades that are really colorful and see if that's still a palette that you need or that you don't already have in your collection. Number 3, watch out for those bundle deals, you guys. Everybody's going to be bundling everything. They're going to try and get you with bundling, and they're going to try and get you with mini sizes. So always do the math. I know sometimes, like the other day, I went to go get a Fenty contour stick. That's all I wanted was 1 stick, but I couldn't get it because all they had was that 1 color in a trio. So it was either buy the trio or leave without it, and I left without it. So watch out for those bundle deals because they'll suck you in with that this holiday season. They're also going to get you with those mini sizes. Oftentimes, if you just spend the extra $3 or $4, you can get the full size, which a lot of times is worth it because they make so much money on those mini sizes. So just be smart this year, guys. Don't get lost in the Christmas madness during the beauty season. They are getting ready to open the floodgates on holiday 2019. I'm telling you, it's going to be insane, and it's coming, mark my words. So brace for it. Make sure that you keep your pocketbook close to chest and make smart buying decisions. Just go into your choices with your eyes wide open. But we will be here as always to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. So make sure that you guys stay tuned. If you are new here, welcome. I'm so glad that you came by. If you are not following me on Instagram, I don't know why. You need to just come over and follow me at Erica Approved over on Instagram and become a member of the Approved crew. We would love to have you. Other than that, you guys, I think that is it for today's video. Listen, I hope all of you guys are very, very happy and very, very healthy. I love you guys the most, and I will see you in the next video. Mwah.